Welcome to Israel Under Fire. I'm Eric Stakelbeck, and it is hard to believe, but it has now been over 2 months since the October 7th massacre, the bloodiest, the most deadly massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Here's the good news, though, folks. The Israel Defense Forces are making major gains right now in their stated goal of crushing Hamas in Gaza. Here is the state of play right now. The IDF has largely taken control in northern Gaza, which was the main power base of Hamas, in particular Gaza City. Now, there is still some fierce fighting in pockets of northern Gaza, but again, Hamas has largely lost control of the north, and that means they have shifted their operations to the south. But guess what? The IDF has been hot on their trail. Right now, Israel is engaged also in fierce fighting in southern Gaza, in particular in Khan Yunis. Now, why is Khan Yunis important? Well, a few reasons. Number one, Khan Yunis is the second largest city in the Gaza Strip. But number two, Israel believes that Hamas's top leadership in the Gaza Strip is hiding in those terror tunnels beneath Khan Yunis. I'm thinking in particular of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza. Now, Israeli officials say that Sinwar is a dead man walking, and if he is indeed in those tunnels beneath Khan Yunis, we may have a major announcement on that front in the days to come. And remember, folks, some 300 miles of Hamas tunnels stretching underneath Gaza, literally a subterranean city. Now, the IDF is trying to tackle that tunnel problem in a few ways. Number one, with airstrikes, obviously, collapsing the tunnels in on those Hamas terrorists. Secondly, drones, even sending dogs into the tunnels to try to root out these Hamas terrorists. But another unique tactic that Israel is reportedly now using in Gaza is to flood those tunnels with seawater from the Mediterranean Sea. Right now, Israel controls some 40% of the territory above ground in Gaza. But again, the main problem, the real sticking point here, is that vast network of terror tunnels beneath Gaza. But at the end of the day, Israel making great gains, no doubt, in this war to decisively crush Hamas once and for all so that it never again poses any sort of threat to the world's one and only Jewish state. Now, we've had hundreds of Hamas fighters in recent days surrender to the IDF. We hope that becomes a massive movement of thousands upon thousands of Hamas jihadists surrendering to the IDF so that the war could be shortened. And of course, Yahya Sinwar, the other key factor here, can he be eliminated by the IDF? But in the meantime, remember, Hamas is, and I don't say this lightly, folks, a demonic death cult. These are modern-day Nazis, only wearing different uniforms. These are fanatics, and we had a taste of that fanaticism recently with some comments from top Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh about the fight in Gaza. Take a look.
بل إن الدم في غزة إلى جانب المقاومة والقسام سينتصر على هذا المحتل، سينتصر على هذا العدو. كما قلت وفي كل مرة أكرر، إن دماء الأطفال والنساء والشيوخ لا أقول تستصرخكم، بل نحن الذين نحتاج هذه الدماء لكي توقظ فينا روح الثورة، لكي توقظ فينا العناد، لكي توقظ فينا التحدي والسير إلى الأمام.
I mentioned the term death cult. Now do you see why? We need the blood, he says, of women, children, and the elderly. And of course, this Hamas leader, Ismail Haniyeh, says all of this from the comfort of his abode in Qatar, thousands of miles away from the Gaza Strip, where reportedly Haniyeh has a personal wealth to the tune of billions of dollars. I wonder where those billions came from. All those billions in international aid funneled into Gaza over the past several years did not go to build schools, to feed the people of Gaza. No, those billions went to build terror tunnels and finance the lavish lifestyles of the likes of Ismail Haniyeh. Now, we want to give a big shout out and a thanks to Palestinian Media Watch to providing that clip. And remember, folks, Gaza is just one ring in a larger Iranian-backed ring of fire that surrounds Israel on all sides. And helpful reminder, Israel is the size of the state of New Jersey, and yet it's surrounded by Gaza, of course, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad there, Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon, the Houthis further south, the various Iran-backed Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. So a quick tour of that ring of fire and multiple fronts. Hezbollah right now in Lebanon continues on a daily basis to launch rockets and anti-tank missiles at northern Israel. Now, the IDF is responding and responding forcefully. Dozens of Hezbollah terrorists have been killed in these exchanges, but you have to think that eventually Israel is going to have to deal with Hezbollah to the north. I know that Israel does not want to fight right now, and understandably on multiple fronts, but you have to believe, folks, that once the dust settles in Gaza and Hamas is crushed, that the IDF will need, out of necessity, to turn its attention to the north, to Hezbollah. It is an unsustainable situation to have Hamas terrorists perched on your northern border with every intent to duplicate the carnage of October 7th. And quick reminder, Hezbollah is magnitudes more powerful than Hamas, equipped with some 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel. Ultimately, and Israeli leaders have said this in recent days, the goal is to push Hezbollah back from the Israel-Lebanon border, back some 20 miles beyond the Litani River. So a larger battle is looming to the north. We've called it here on Under Fire the coming Great Northern War. In the meantime, to the south, some 1,000 miles south of Israel, lies Yemen, and that is the home of the Iran-backed Houthi rebels who have been very active in recent days, firing rockets and missiles in the direction of Israel. Now, thankfully, these rockets and missiles have been intercepted by both Israeli air defenses and U.S. destroyers stationed in the Red Sea. But the Houthis have taken it a step further now and are hijacking shipping in the Red Sea. Folks, this is a major problem developing off the coast of Yemen in that vital Red Sea, a crucial waterway that eventually the U.S., Israel, or both are going to have to deal with. Now, in terms of October 7th and the carnage of that day, some 1,200 mostly civilian Israelis slaughtered, over 240 more dragged away into captivity in Gaza, that is still fresh in our minds here on Israel Under Fire, and yet some leaders around the world seem to have relatively shorter memories. Let's just say we had the leaders, the prime ministers of Canada, Australia, and New Zealand release a statement this week calling for an immediate ceasefire to Israel's activities. And even President Biden said that Israel is, quote, indiscriminately bombing civilians in Gaza. Now, he knows that's not true. As we've documented here on Israel Under Fire, the IDF is the most humane fighting force alongside the U.S. military in human history. I know that's a quite bold statement to make, but I believe it is accurate. The Israel Defense Forces go to extraordinary lengths to avoid civilian casualties, and yet we have increasing this chorus of Western leaders pressuring Israel. Well, if Israel did agree to a premature ceasefire, which is not happening, what would Hamas do? What would Hamas do if it was left alive to fight another day? We got a clue recently from Hamas official Osama Hamdan and some comments he made about Hamas's future goals. Take a look.
لو عاد الزمن بكم إلى 6 تشرين بتعملوا 7 تشرين كنتوا؟
لماذا يفترض البعض أننا سنتراجع عن دورنا وفعلنا المقاوم؟
ما في ندم يعني؟
ندم أننا حطمنا فرقة غزة، فرقة كاملة في جيش الاحتلال.
قلت لي انه في حال الاسرائيليين رجعوا اقدموا على اعتقالات جديده بعد تصفير السجون بتعملوا عمليه ثانيه، يعني يمكن ان تعدوا ب7 اكتوبر جديده؟
انا استطيع ان اعد بمعركه تحرير قادمه وليس فقط 7 اكتوبر.
بالمدى المنظور؟
لا أظن أن ذلك سيكون بعيدا. ما حصل في 7 أكتوبر وما بعده أوضح بجلاء أن هذا الكيان مستقبله في المنطقة ليس مضمونا.
Thanks again to Palestinian Media Watch for another very revealing clip. Clearly, folks, Hamas wants to duplicate October 7th, and if they are left alive and kicking, they will try to do exactly that. Thankfully, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen have said that's a non-starter. And despite international pressure, Netanyahu said just today, we will not stop. And I quote, nothing will stop us, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, from our stated goal of destroying Hamas. Well, someone who knows that stated goal very well and is doing battle in the international arena in the very important sphere of public relations and getting the message out on behalf of Israel is Eylon Levy, Israeli government spokesman, joins us from Tel Aviv now. Eylon, thanks so much for taking a break from your very busy schedule to join us. Hey, you've been making the case for Israel in the international arena 24/7 around the clock since October 7th. For our viewers, why would it be disastrous for Israel to agree to a ceasefire now and leave Hamas alive to fight another day?
Eric, that was an excellent summary, and I wish I could see you presenting on BBC and Sky News as well, because you got straight to the point. Hamas is threatening us with another October 7th massacre again and again, as many as it takes, until they murder every man, woman, and child in our country. And that is the meaning of any end to the fighting that does not end with the end of Hamas. Because those calling for an immediate ceasefire want to leave Hamas free to attack our people like it did on 10/7, and emboldened, because the next time Hamas will think it has the backing of the international community to perpetrate more acts of rape and burning and beheadings, knowing that it has the world behind it that won't let Israel defend its people. And that's why we've been standing very firmly against international pressure. That's why Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been telling the world very clearly, despite all the pressure, that we are going to continue defeating Hamas until we achieve all three of our war aims: the total destruction of Hamas, the return of all the hostages, and to make sure that the Gaza Strip can never hurt our people again. Those are the three goals set forward by the War Cabinet under Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership, and those are the goals we're going to continue to pursue.
Eylon, one of those goals, obviously, seeing the release of the hostages, still some 130, it seems, hostages in the clutches of Hamas in Gaza. Do you have any update on the status of the remaining hostages and the efforts to see them freed?
There are 135 people who are still being held hostage since 10/7, including 19 who were murdered by Hamas, which is now holding onto their bodies for a ransom. There are still women there, and there are still children who are being held hostage by Hamas. Now, the policy that Prime Minister Netanyahu's war cabinet declared at the beginning has been vindicated. It came under criticism. People were skeptical about whether it would work, but Prime Minister Netanyahu's strategy has proven itself. And that is to put unrelenting military pressure on Hamas to force it to release our hostages. That was how we got the last hostage release pause. We put unrelenting military pressure on Hamas. We clobbered it. We had it begging for a breather. And in exchange for a few days' pause, it was willing to release hostages. And we got 110 of them out. But then on December 1st, Hamas decided to break the agreement, to terminate the hostage release pause, to hold on to the remaining women and children, and to resume hostilities against Israel. And the strategy that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet are promoting now with full force is to keep pressuring Hamas until it releases all the hostages. We are committed to that pledge that there will be no one left behind. The Prime Minister, Netanyahu, has said very clearly, we will fight to get everyone out. The women and the men, the young and the old, the soldiers and the civilians. There will be no one left behind, because none of us here in Israel are free until all of them are free.
Yeah, and Eylon, Israel, the IDF, are trying to do this, and they're doing a great job of it, under probably the world's strictest military rules of engagement. The IDF goes to extraordinary lengths to spare any civilian casualties, and yet we hear this constant drumbeat, including here in the West, these calls for Israel to, quote, respect and follow international humanitarian law. I don't think that needs to be said. I think Israel's doing a pretty good job of that, but nonetheless, that international pressure mounts, and we hear accusations of Israel indiscriminately targeting civilians in Gaza, etc. What's your take on that? And can you just set the record straight for everyone watching about how seriously the IDF does take civilian casualties and avoiding them at all costs, even at times putting Israeli soldiers at risk to avoid killing any civilians?
You know, this war could have been over on October 8th if Israel had decided to unleash its full firepower and not care about civilians. But we care about civilians, and that's why the IDF has been going to lengths that no army in the history of warfare has done to try to keep civilians safe from their own leaders, because Hamas is trying to maximize casualties while we are trying to minimize them. I know it may sound difficult to accept given some of the scenes we are seeing, but the IDF is setting a new gold standard now for counterterrorism in urban areas. When the enemy is deliberately trying to sacrifice civilians, it sounds sick and it is twisted. Hamas is trying to sacrifice Palestinian civilians in the hope that will generate international sympathy, in the hope that will generate international pressure that will tie Israel's hands and stop us from defending ourselves. And we are going after Hamas leaders with incredible precision. That's why from 22,000 strikes that we have conducted, even if you accept the casualty numbers that Hamas is presenting and we dispute them, you're looking at less than 0.8 deaths per strike. That tells you the incredible precision with which we are attacking Hamas infrastructure and Hamas terrorists, and we are going after all of their leaders. We've taken out half of the Hamas battalion commanders. We killed the commander of the Shaja'iyah battalion, and then when his deputy took over, we killed him, and then we're telling his replacement that he is on notice too as well. Because it is very important as well for the war cabinet led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that we will use the full force of the IDF against the monsters who perpetrated 10/7 while upholding our obligations under international law. And I have to say, we take international law and the international rules-based order so much more seriously than the people who try to make up the rules and make up international law in a way to hurt Israel and to try to keep the Hamas terror regime on life support. And that's a terror regime that this government, headed by Prime Minister Netanyahu, is determined to bring to its knees.
Eylon, last question. We have about 45 seconds. Hey, you were born and raised in London. You were educated at Oxford. You made Aliyah to Israel. And now you are doing battle in the ideological war, I guess you would say, the war of ideas on behalf of Israel. You're on the BBC, Sky News. Not always easy, needless to say. What motivates you and why do you do what you do?
We have to win. We have to win because we need children to be able to sleep safely in their beds in Kfar Aza and Nir Oz and Be'eri. What happened on 10/7 was the bloodiest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and that cannot go unanswered. Israeli society is united with a very strong sense of justice and unity right now around an understanding that we must win this war. We didn't want this war. We didn't start this war. We didn't expect this war, but we must win this war. And it must end with the end of Hamas, because that is the only way that we can bring security for us, for our children, and that we can begin to rebuild our lives after the horrific, unspeakable atrocities of 10/7.
Eylon Levy, thank you so much for joining us. Happy Hanukkah, my friend. We will see you again soon. Keep up the great work. God bless.
Thank you very much. You too.
Thanks,
God
Eylon.
bless.
Telling it like it is, folks. This is really no time to mince words. Great insights there from Eylon Levy. And he's really become one of Israel's most eloquent spokesmen in battling back against this anti-Israel narrative that we've seen take hold. I'm sad to say, across the world, we have anti-Semitism at levels unseen since the days of the Nazis in the run-up to World War II. The difference now is that where it was largely localized in Nazi Germany, of course, in Europe, this is now a global phenomenon and not a good one, obviously. So we will continue here on Israel Under Fire to sound the alarm, to have guests on like Eylon Levy and others who are telling the truth and giving you the ammo you need, the intellectual ammo to fight this war of ideas on behalf of Israel. Hey, Israel needs a few good friends right now, and we've got millions upon millions of evangelical Christians who are stepping up to do exactly that. Well, a very good friend of Israel, a former chief of staff for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is Yakel Leiter. He's here with us now. His son, Moshe, 39 years old, a father of 6, a brave IDF soldier, was killed in action last month fighting Hamas terrorists. Yakel joins us to tell Moshe's story and to share the stakes, why Israel must fight. Yakel, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, we are so sorry for your loss, and we're just so honored that you're here with us during this difficult time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Eric. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, you are a former chief of staff for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. You had a very important conversation with him recently, but I wanted to start, Yakel, with you sharing a little bit about your son, Moshe, why he was such a special, special man, a father, a soldier. Tell us more about Moshe.
Moshe was my firstborn, the oldest of 8 children. And he was a very remarkable human being. He was not only my firstborn, but he was also my best friend. I would frequent his advice because he just had tremendous insight into life. He was full of life. He had a zest and zeal for life. He spent 15 years in our equivalent of the Delta Force or the SAS in Great Britain, our Shaldog unit, Special Ops in the Air Force. And after 15 years, at the age of 33, he decided to go to med school. And he went to the first medical class at our Yale University. And he was actually supposed to start his rounds of clinical training on October 8th this year. But he completed his medical studies while he was studying for his medical degree. He would do 80, 90 days of reserve duty a year. He was a major, but he decided to go into this battle as a squadron commander because he loved his soldiers in his organic unit and they loved him. And just following up on your previous conversation with Eylon Levy, it's quite possible that if Israel was not as careful as it is about collateral damage, that my son would be alive. We chose to enter Gaza with infantry and with special forces instead of strafe bombing the entire area, which we could have done. I think probably most any other country in the world would have done. So when people so easily, cavalierly criticize us about collateral damage, they ought to know first what they're talking about. And I know how much my son cared for human life, and he left 6 children behind. I just came from a Hanukkah party at his home. His youngest son is 4 months old, never know his dad, and I know that it's tough. We're a bereaved family. We're grieving him, but we're also very, very proud because his battle is not only the battle of the Jewish people in the state of Israel, but it's the battle of sanity. It's the battle of humanity against barbarism. It's a battle for Western civilization is what it is, not just for Israel's safety. And the sooner people in Europe and the United States understand that, the more support we're going to get.
Yakel, so true. Israel is truly the first line of defense for Western civilization. You had a chance to speak with Prime Minister Netanyahu recently. Of course, you worked as his chief of staff previously. Can you share any of what you shared with the Prime Minister about the importance of finishing this war, finishing the goal, the job of crushing Hamas?
Well, really, you have to understand, I'll get to my conversation with the Prime Minister in a moment, but what really needs to be understood is that, even President Biden referred to Hamas, those who perpetrated the attacks of 10/7, as bestial, as animals. But we have to appreciate the fact that there isn't just a group of terrorists. They're 30 to 40,000 strong. I mean, that's quite a sizable army, and that was a government of 2 million people in Gaza. All of the funding that came from the international community was poured into those tunnels. Now, understand what we're talking about when we speak about a tunnel city. We're talking about something the width almost of the state of Pennsylvania, 300, 400 miles of tunnels that contain weapons smuggled in over the Egyptian border. The Egyptians have not been doing what we would expect of a partner in peace to be doing. We're going to have to insist on that. So when the Prime Minister talks about ending Hamas, we're talking about ending a government that is an occupying force controlling 2 million people and stealing their funds, taking their money, and using it to import Iranian weapons and Iranian funding in order to threaten not only Israel, but Western civilization, as I said. When the Prime Minister called me, I was on the way to my son's funeral, and he called with a message of consolation. And I said, Bibi, I want to demand of you one thing, that my son's blood was not spent in vain, and that this job you take to the end, you finish this, and make sure there's no more Hamas at the end of this process. And the Prime Minister said, Yechiel, I swear. He didn't say he chose to use the words very carefully. He said, I swear that I will not stop until this job is done. This is a matter of protecting and defending humanity against the ultimate evil. Eric, if I just can make another point, we're products of a generation. I guess I'm a little bit older, judging from my gray hair and your looks, that I'm a little older than you are. But we belong to a generation where progressivism and wokeism has taken hold of society. And it's a wokeism that says that there's no objective truth. We kind of laugh at history and make fun of anything that might smack of values. But these guys in Hamas, the Iranians, they are teaching us that there is something called objective truth, and there is something called objective morality, and there is something called objective evil. It's not a kind of a subjective game where everybody determines for himself what evil is. These people are the paradigms of evil. And this is a cult of death, I think you said in your introduction. That's exactly what we're talking about. We're celebrating Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the festival of lights. And it's an interesting thing about fire. Fire consumes, but fire also illuminates. And we have to use fire judiciously. We have to use fire against our enemies. We have to use firepower because sometimes it's the only language that they understand. And then internally, we can use fire for illumination, to light and for warmth. And hopefully, if we properly eliminate the terrorists and the evil, we'll be able to use light for warmth and for light.
Yeah. Israel is a light in the darkness. Yechiel, your son Moshe was certainly like that. Yechiel, God bless you and your family, your grandchildren. May Moshe's memory be a blessing. Happy Hanukkah. We'd love to have you back again soon to share your insights. This was powerful, Yechiel. Thank you so much. Hang in there. We'll all be praying for you. The entire TBN family are praying for you and your family.
Well, thank you very much, Eric, and thank you. God bless you for continuing to telling the truth. And your prayers are much appreciated. I still have 4 other sons in the Army and 2 sons-in-law in the thick of battle. So your prayers are much appreciated.
We'll keep them coming, Yechiel. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon. God bless.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Powerful insights there from Yechiel Leiter and his son Moshe. Again, folks, paying the ultimate sacrifice, 39 years old, 6 children, a beautiful wife, studying to become a doctor. He was a paramedic. These are the stakes right now. This is what Israel is up against. People like Moshe promising young family men who have everything to live for, they're putting it all on the line to preserve their way of life, to preserve their very existence. This is an existential struggle that Israel is locked in, not only against Hamas in Gaza, but Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the head of the snake behind this regional terror, the Iranian regime in Tehran. Now, it is Hanukkah, and Christmas is also nearly upon us. And when we talk about being a light in the darkness and looking for some positivity out of all the darkness, out of the evil that was unleashed on October 7th, folks, we have got a story for you as we close here on Israel Under Fire. Amelia Aloni, she and her mother Daniela, Amelia, 5 years old, was ripped from her home on October 7th and taken hostage in Gaza. Amelia, thankfully, was released during that truce when dozens of Israeli hostages were released by Hamas terrorists. Amelia, 5 years old, was one of them, thank God. And she recently returned to her kindergarten in Israel and was greeted by her teacher and her classmates. Take a look at the reception she received.
Oh. Yo, sábale, قبل خانشي. כזה ריגוש. איפה הבלונים? איזה חמודות. מירב, אני רוצה תמונה. מירב, אני רוצה תמונה איתה. רמוס, אני חייבת על מעבר. איזה כיף לראות אותך. כמה פעמים נסעתי בדרך, עשיתי הלב היה נצבע.
Folks, I have 2 daughters of my own, and I just kept thinking about them as I was watching that clip with little Amelia. Can you imagine what she went through week upon week in Hamas captivity in a tunnel somewhere beneath Gaza? But you know what? Light triumphed over darkness once again, and in this existential struggle, literally pitting good and evil against each other. There are no gray areas here, folks. It's very black and white. Israel is engaged in a civilizational struggle against demonic evil in Gaza. The light will win out. It always will. Thanks so much for joining us here on Israel Under Fire. Until next time, God bless you. We'll see you again soon.